Hi, friend, and welcome back to Marvelous Friends, your home for all things Marvel Cinematic Universe and beyond. I'm Rhett, and today I'm going to be talking about the MCU's first mutant. Roll that credit. I know, the Marvel is not introducing the X-Men for at least 5 more years, but that doesn't mean that Marvel won't start making nods and hints and creating the initial stepping stones to create that origin story. So far, there is 5 primary bases and origin stories for powers in the MCU, this being technology, science, cosmic or alien, inhuman, or magic. Now, some examples of each. Iron Man, of course, is a perfect example of technology-based powers. Tony Stark, being incredibly intelligent, worked in his workshop to build the suit of armor that gave him his powers. Captain America is a great example of science-based, considering the super serum, which was created in a lab by scientists and then experimented on Steve Rogers, is what gave him the Captain America power. Thor would be a great example of our cosmic and or alien power set. Technically, the Asgardians are alien, otherworldly dimensioned. It's a little kind of iffy based upon how you want to look at it, but either way, that would qualify as that power set. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. dealt highly with Inhumans towards the first half of its series and has started to get back into it a little bit again, and Quake is probably the quintessential Inhuman. And then finally, of course, Doctor Strange, who is Earth's Sorcerer Supreme, is a perfect example of a magic-wielding superhero. However, there is a sixth that is soon to come, and of course that is mutant. Now, mutants to mutate have to have the mutation in their genes to have such abilities. So anyone who naturally has powers has to have gone through Terrigenesis through this point. Now, I plan on doing a whole video that breaks down the difference between a mutant and an inhuman at some point on the channel, probably here in the next week or so, especially considering we're going to be gearing up so much for this kind of deviation between power sets. So I'm not going to go into huge detail here, but basically, like I said, mutants have a specific gene that causes the mutation. Inhumans have it in their biological makeup that they have alien DNA kind of spliced in, and they have to go through a process called Terrigenesis to activate their powers. Now, before 2015, assuming that Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s timeline kind of runs concurrent with ours, that process of Terrigenesis was very controlled. It wasn't just something happening out in the open for kind of anyone to be exposed to. So that's also going to be a very important part of this video specifically. One of my major questions about Jessica Jones Season 3 is the exact timing of it in the greater MCU timeline. And it's very hard to place, let me tell you. I went through the footage when I was finishing up my videos through the Season 3 breakdown summaries and thoughts, and I had to get several photos, and while I was doing so, I specifically paid attention to anything that had a newspaper, any kind of publication, phones, text message calls, anything that potentially on the phone kind of pop up a home screen, news or TV broadcasts, all of it. Everything that would typically have some kind of date or time or something in relation to that on it, and not a single one of them did, which was very interesting, because usually, yes, Marvel does go ahead and put dates on these little things just to kind of give Easter eggs for us fans to figure out where it falls in the greater timeline. So I wonder why they specifically chose to, because it was done so meticulously to not include any dates that it had to be done on purpose. Which then leads me to question, where on the timeline does Jessica Jones 3 fall in the greater MCU? My best guess, though, based upon all the context clues that we can kind of gather from the season, is that it's happening during the events of Infinity War, before the snap. And honestly, probably before the aliens arrived in New York City, because there is no mention of anything going on in there. There's no kind of hints at this, and we did see some kind of aerial shots of big cities during that time period between the first snap and when we picked up 5 years later, and we saw that a lot of things kind of had fallen in disarray, and New York seems pretty business as usual, and honestly, there wasn't anyone missing, which I've already spoken on this in a video regarding Spider-Man Far From Home. There is potentially, I guess, a small chance that this happened post this first snap and everyone in Jessica Jones's universe just kind of stuck around. But I'm going to guess that is not. So I'm going to affirm that this happens shortly thereafter, Season 2, and then basically takes on right from there. Now, we did get also a little bit of clue that this is potentially the case as well, because we saw this second episode pick up with Trish from the moment the season 2 ended. And we did see some time lapse there, but I would say probably no more than 3 or 4 months. And so I would say we've pretty much picked up right from there, and the events of Infinity War would happen after season 3 of Jessica Jones. Now, I know that was a whole rant about timeline, but that is important as well to the concept of this video. Now, there are a lot of theories out there, theory videos, theory posts. I have theory videos, and I'm going to have more, I am sure, as we move forward regarding everything in the long-term effects post the snap. And I think those effects are going to have things that not only affect the future, but actually affect the past, as we did see time travel as a big part of that, and then going back pretty far into the past. And we know that there is time travel coming up in Phase 4 as well, so there's going to be some kind of some consequences from the past as well. And I think we could have potentially seen some of this. Now, I'm not going to get into all those theories of how the multiverse and time travel and the snaps are affecting everything moving forward. Those are separate videos, and I will probably touch on those at some point. Without getting into all that, though, I would just like to say that for the purpose of this video, I think those effects on the past have come to fruition in Jessica Jones Season 3, as the MCU has given us our first mutant in Eric Geldon. In the comics, Eric Geldon is known as Mindwave, a telepath who relies on a tech-based helmet to give him his powers. Now, this allows him to basically mentally blind anyone who is not telekinetic in their own right, as well as communicate to others who are wearing similar helmets. This, of course, like I said, based upon the categories before, technically in the comics makes him a tech-based hero. However, Marvel made the specific choice to make that change in this adaptation. In the Jessica Jones adaptation, we see him being much more of a telepath on a empath level, where he can sense the evil and lack of remorse for doing evil in others, not necessarily being able to delve into their mind to see what they actually did, but just receiving that kind of telekinetic wave of feeling and pain when he comes into contact with those who have kind of met that criteria. Now, we do kind of learn his origin stories. These powers came to fruition in college while he was away, and coming home and really having the first major experience them with his father, and finding out that his father was having inappropriate relations with his little sister, and that being the first time he really kind of used the ability and kind of challenged it and really felt the full effects. However, there are some very specific things that we learn in this origin story. He says that he just changed when he came home from college one time. There was no mention of a transformation. There's no kind of mention of Terrigenesis, which would be very particular, and I think that the lack of these mentions was also a very particular choice by Marvel, because these are things that I feel like that if they wanted to create that true division, especially moving forward, that they would make sure to mention one of these two. Now, we know from the comics of X-Men that there's a couple factors that can trigger a mutation of the mutant gene. Now, this can be something regarding stress, a high anxiety stress level, or a particular kind of situation causes that rapid development. And what is not more stressful than college, am I right? For those of you out there who have been or is currently in college, it is a time of a ton of stress, and so that would check it off. Also, another thing that can trigger the mutation is just natural bodily development, and when you're in that age of your early 20s, you are going through a lot of physical changes and mental and physical development, so again, that is a potential kind of check mark for the qualifications for the triggering of the mutant gene, which is a very interesting thought. Now I'm going to take you back to one of those important things I mentioned earlier in the video. Like I said, up to about 2015, Terrigenesis was a very controlled process, only those being selected by Afterlife to go through the process, and many of those actually having been at Afterlife and have been on that waiting list for quite a bit of time before actually being selected to go through the process, with only 1 or 2 being put through every few years. Now, this is all information we learned from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Now, he has not mentioned anything about that. Again, there's no mention of Terrigenesis or anything like that, and considering the timeline of when he would have gone through the process in college, it doesn't add up. For those who don't know, Jessica Jones is roughly in her mid to late 30s at this point now in the Season 3, based upon my assumptions of timeline. And that means that if we can infer that roughly Eric is the same age as her, that he would have been in college in the mid to early 2000s, roughly 15 years before the mass global exposure of the Terrigen crystals that caused the random Terrigenesis that we saw in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And considering he again does not mention anything about Afterlife life or this selection process in his origin story. It's again a safe, strong pointing to the fact that he is actually a mutant and not an inhuman. Now, what does this mean for the MCU and their mutants? It definitely means that something is going to happen in the past to cause the trigger of the mutant gene. Now, again, this is a whole other video entirely, but I just kind of want to say this in a general kind of sense, not really going into much detail. Now, this means that something that we will see probably throughout Phase 4 are these little tidbits and clues as to what mutants are going to look like in the greater MCU for Phase 5 or 6, however that falls in the timeline of introduction of the greater X-Men, which makes sense because we will inevitably kind of see a variation of age ranges when we finally get introduced to them at that point, because, you know, Charles Xavier will most likely be older than all the students and all of that, and so it makes sense that we'll already had multiple generations in the MCU by the time we actually get introduced to them, and it'll be just kind of like an exploiting of a backstory regarding that whole process and where they've been now in this kind of deviated timeline. Because remember, that's going to be a big point. We know that from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. that there is things that have gone really heinously wrong with the timeline now because of everything that's been going on, not only in the Infinity Wars, but all the time travel and time changing that the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. have been doing during Season 5. So there's going to be a lot of kind of mixing and mashing, and I think that's going to be a big point. But be watching for all these Easter eggs, because I'm sure there's going to be little tidbits and clues and little kind of stepping stones in that path as we kind of slowly get introduced to the idea of mutants into the MCU during Phase 4 at the earliest. What did you think of my little theory and what I gathered while watching Jessica Jones Season 3? Do you think Eric is potentially our first mutant, or do you think he's just an Inhuman and they just really didn't get into it? Let me know down in those comments below. If you like this video and this series, make sure to give it a thumbs up and a like, and of course subscribe so you make sure you get all my future content as we continue down to Phase 4, which is almost here as Spider-Man is only just coming out literally today as I post this video. I'm so excited. Gonna go see that tonight. Are you gonna go see it? Let me know that down there as well. Until next time, though, I love you all 3,000, and I hope you have a marvelous rest of your day. Bye, friend!